when you start looking at what's involved, it's like only a crazy person would even try and create this business.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today we're speaking with the executive director of a family-owned and operated company that has become the world's largest group fitness provider. What began as a single gym in Auckland, New Zealand, more than 50 years ago, has evolved into a business with a network of more than 140,000 trained instructors who deliver exciting training programs to millions of fitness enthusiasts each week. Driven by the defining philosophy to make people fall in love with fitness, he has spent decades dedicated to pushing the envelope to offer life-changing fitness experiences to the masses. This ambitious mogul opens up about how he harnessed technology to expand the market, how he dealt with setbacks and failure, and how digital fitness is shifting the club industry. So please welcome the founder and executive director of Les Mills International, Mr. Phillip Mills, to the Escape Your Limits podcast.
I was driving my brother-in-law, who was the lead singer of the band. He just played at the Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset. He played alongside the Knack, a band called the Knack, who did My Sharona and Martha and the Motels, and his band was pretty successful. But he was drunk as a skunk, and I was driving him home. He and his sister lived with me in Westwood at UCLA in my apartment at the time, and he'd never learned to drive, and I'd tried to teach him to drive at one stage before. And it had been a horrifying experience, but he said, "Come on, let me drive the car. I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling good. Let me drive the car." So I said, "All right, okay, Graham, I'll let you drive the car." And he drove. I let him drive around the block, and he was, micro meters away from the cars on the side of the road, and I'm panicking the whole way around. I said, "Okay, that's great. Well done. We're going to park the car." And I said, "You've got to go into the garage, and I've got my car. You're going to park behind my car, which is in the garage, and there's a car parked on the street. You've got to swing wide to miss that and park behind my car." So he swung very wide. And I said, "Make sure you hit the brakes. And you don't panic and drive into my car." So he swung and I took his foot on and off the brake accelerator. So, all right, he swings very wide, and then, of course, goes to hit the brakes, hits the accelerator by mistake, panics, and the car accelerates. It's got tires that big. It's a 1968 Pontiac GTO, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, and it was the band's car, and he swung so wide that he went into the neighbour's garage, and he kept his foot flat to the floor with this big hot rod, and he concertinaed their car to about two-thirds of its size into the garage wall, the concrete wall in front, and he smashed through the garage door was shut. He smashed through it, and there was a huge crash, and just matchwood, broken timber from the door, and the whole neighbourhood sort of went quiet. People's heads, looking through their windows, and a minute later my sister appears outside, starts bashing her husband over the head with a slipper and saying, I knew it was you. And there was just devastation all around. This is a catastrophe. And he and I looked at each other, and we just started laughing. We just couldn't stop laughing and giggling. And it's a horrific thing. We had to pay the landlord to fix the garage and pay the neighbours for fixing their car and that. But that's sort of some of the things that happen in the rock and roll industry.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code DUMBBELL. That's escapefitness.com using the code DUMBBELL. That's it for me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
So Philip, thank you so much for joining us on today's podcast. How are you doing at the moment?
Good, thanks, Matthew. It's pretty nice here in New Zealand. We've been free of COVID for a while. The last lockdown for our clubs was about August, September, and it's summer here. So, we're not out of the woods, but it's feeling pretty nice compared to, I think, what it's like in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, you guys seem to be doing something right. Is it the fact that you're just all super fit and healthy, or has there been some other things that your government's done that we haven't done elsewhere in the world, do you think?
Oh, I think we're a small island nation, a long way away from anywhere else, so it's pretty easy to block the borders. But yeah, in terms of being fit and healthy, that's a nice one. I think the nicest quote that I've seen through the pandemic is your best defense. It's short of a vaccine, your best defense against the virus is to be fit and healthy. Isn't that a lovely quote for our industry? Short of a vaccine, your best defense against the virus is to be fit and healthy.
So it seems so obvious for many of us within the industry, and it's a question I've asked many people on this podcast. Why do you think some of the, I guess, leaders are not maybe making more of a big deal about this? Do you think that it's not quite top of priority at the moment, or what's your view on that?
Do you mean government leaders, or do you mean industry leaders?
Government leaders, I guess, because I suppose the industry leaders seem to be doing what they can, but I guess to some extent they're limited by their local governments or sheriffs or people within where they're operating at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think it did take the industry a while to fire up most places around the world. We went after it very aggressively, started talking directly to the government, to the Minister of Health, and to other senior government officials very early on, really pushing the argument that, look, about a third of New Zealanders use gyms of some kind. And we've all seen the ESA studies that say 20% of Americans, but they leave a lot of different types of gyms out, the university gyms, the residential gyms, the casual visits to boutiques, all that stuff. Our research that we've done at Les Mills around the world shows that about 33% of people in industrialized countries are going to some kind of a gym. And, it's the biggest sport in the world. There are more, if you count the number of hours that people spend doing different exercise activities, going to the gym is the biggest sport in the world. And we pushed that very hard with government. We said, look, there's a third of New Zealanders who are really relying on this as their main form of exercise, and it is going to do a whole lot more damage to the health system if we're not allowed to operate than if we are. And we can operate very safely. We can do contact tracing extremely well, better than most businesses. We can do all of these things to make it safe. And we had an example of that. We had a health worker in one of the rare sort of breakouts in New Zealand over the last few months. We had a health worker who came into one of our clubs one evening and the next morning and did classes each time. And we worked with the health department. We were able to trace 92 close contacts. They tested every one of them 3 times over the next 2 weeks, and there was not a single case of transmission. So that's one great example, I think, of the fitness industry operating safely. These were in group exercise classes, 2 meters social distancing. We'd marked out spots on the floor, but people are there close and no transmission. So we can operate safely, and look, it's just going to cause, back to that original quote, your best defense against COVID is to be fit. It's going to cause a whole bunch more health problems if gyms aren't allowed to open. We pushed that very hard with our government. Richard Betty, the head of Exercise New Zealand, and I really went hard after it and worked with the bureaucrats, worked with them, arguing the case, and we in the end got pretty good rules. We were able to open with reasonable numbers of people, not too heavy a set of restrictions in New Zealand, and we haven't had a single case of transmission through a gym.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty good. I know in different parts of the world they're going through challenges, and we've spoken to a number of operators where they're trying to also engage government, and I guess some of it's educate people, educate some of these politicians in terms of how these businesses are being run and how clean they are. And I guess, when you look at it from a sort of medium to long term, and as it relates to trying to take the pressure off a lot of the hospital beds and that, you certainly see that that the obesity is the number of people that are being treated for that is that's also seems to be increasing quite significantly. So do you think that once this is leveled out and people can start sort of being more proactive, do you think that agenda is going to be a lot more important for all countries around the world? So, we need to tackle this obesity. I know you did a book back in 2016 about the subject, but do you think that's going to be more important for people, particularly in the industry, to be aware of and to be involved in?
Okay, what we're seeing in the surveys is more people saying that they do want to be fit and focus on their fitness once we come out of lockdowns. Whether that will remain, whether they will retain that motivation, will be interesting to see. I think we're in the motivation industry as much as we are in the exercise industry, so it is really down to us to do our job well and to create motivating places with fun exercise and nice social contacts and great staff and cool design, places where people want to be, all of that sort of stuff that makes gyms motivating. I think it's very important that we do that well, and I think that your best model of that right now in the world is the boutiques. The boutiques are doing that extremely well, and I think that the traditional clubs have to learn from that. We've got to keep moving into the future. Those guys are, they're employing great instructors, they've got great group exercise classes, they've got cool designs, cool brands, all that stuff. So I think the traditional industry is going to have to take responsibility for itself to a large degree to keep moving forward and motivating people, as well as being good at getting them good results in terms of their exercise. Governments do seem to be talking a little bit more about it. Governments have known this for a long time. The book that we wrote, that Jackie and I wrote published in 2007, but we wrote sort of most of it 2005 and 6. Fighting Obesity was not just about obesity. This was really about having a healthier body and a healthier planet. There was a lot of environmental stuff with the relationships between eating well, eating organic food, being better for your body and being better in terms of sequestering carbon. So that's a topic we've been interested in for a very long time, and that information has been there in governments. One of the arguments that we made was you've got to stop the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff approach to health. You've got to get people, you've got to deal with this sort of I think the US by now is spending about $4 trillion on its health system overall, and about 3/4 of that is chronic illness. The best way to treat chronic illness is by getting people fit, by getting them eating well, by improving their environment, and that's around about double what it would cost the whole world on an annual basis, really, to deal with climate change effectively. So if you look at the big picture, the guns and butter analysis of it, then there are all sorts of reasons why government should be pursuing this. For some reason, they haven't pursued it very aggressively. We're starting to see them talking about that during this pandemic. I think we've got to hold their feet to the fire and really push them to do that, because this is an important thing for society going forward. It's a very important thing for health. It's an important thing for government finances and our health systems, that we move more to a preventative approach than the old ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. So long answer to a short question, I'm sorry, but it's it is a complex sort of a question.
And what do you think about the messaging? I know historically a lot of the traditional fitness messaging is been based around aesthetics, and I guess now with what's happening around the world, the message is probably more about health and resilience, as opposed to a six pack and a nice bum. Do you think that the message for fitness, and I'm talking as the industry as a whole, needs to evolve to be able to, I guess, tap into to a slightly different audience than what would generally go to the traditional fitness facilities?
Look, it's another complex question. I think that we've been chasing the aging market and the deconditioned market for a long time, and there hasn't been a great deal of success in our industry with appealing to those markets. You know, they are difficult groups to motivate, to get them to come into clubs. When you really look at the research around it, older people tend to engage in other exercise activities. They tend to sort of to go hiking and other things like that, rather than go to gyms. The gyms tend to be, I think, one of the big reasons for the rise of the gym industry is that people have become time poor. When we're working, you know, we need to be able to exercise pretty quickly, and that needs to be near our home or near our place of work, all of that stuff. So I think it will happen, but I think it's whatever works. The fact is that when we look at the motivations for why people go to gyms, the number one reason, until people are about 60 years old, the number one reason is still to get in shape. It is around looking good. So, and then even at 60 years old, when the two lines on the graph intersect, still for older people, it's looking good stays very important. You know, health becomes equally important, but older people like me, we still want to look, you know, we still want to look reasonable. Want to kid ourselves that we've got some sex appeal or something to our wives. I think the real reason, the real benefit there is that none of us can see so well at my age, so we all keep on looking good to each other. We see each other as we did when we were sort of 20 years old. Works in my marriage at any rate. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm an ugly old bastard, but my wife is still looking beautiful and young at 60. So some of the other big reasons that people join, motivation is pretty high. People express it in different ways in terms of what they're looking for, but they want a gym that is going to be an appealing place for them to go. You know, we've talked about it being our third place. A lot of gym owners now are saying actually we're becoming their second place because a lot of people are working remotely. And people want to have a nice social place to go. They want to have a place that does have nice aesthetic design values and nice people, nice staff, and sort of fun activities, and you know, the equipment industry, the group exercise industry, all of us play a part in that, in making exercise more and more enjoyable for people. Music is a really important part of it. Background music, anything, you know, in your gym. Sometimes I'll walk into a beautiful gym somewhere in the world, and I'll think, what's wrong here? There's the atmosphere, it's just a bit dead. And you realize, oh, there's no music, you know, and you ask the manager, and they'll say, oh, some of the members complain. I'm very careful about listening to member complaints. You know, do your surveys and survey them properly. We've found that it's about 2 to 3% of members who complain about the volume of the music in the gyms or in the group exercise rooms. And they tend to disproportionately affect it for the others. You know, most people like to have music playing, and it makes the atmosphere more enjoyable. I like to have audio-visual stuff going on. I like to have music video in particular on big screens going on in gyms. Those things energize the gym, and they just make it more enjoyable for people to be there. So a lot of the motivation stuff. What else? People are talking more and more about wellness and about mental health and feeling good, emotional health. That is probably becoming the third reason why people are going to gyms. You know, they want to look good, yes, but they also want to feel good. And that's an interesting one. So we're seeing, you know, the rise of yoga and mindfulness and other mind-body modalities in clubs. There was a big survey this year that said that yoga was the biggest group exercise activity in the US, which interests me. So a lot of the yoga market itself is interesting. You know, you've got two different markets within that. You've got people who do want to feel good, who want renewal and regeneration. You've also got people who want physical control, who want perfection and perfect physical control of their bodies. You know, yoga is a functional strength workout. A lot of people think of yoga as a stretching workout. Well, of course, there are hundreds of different types of yoga, but you know, most of the yoga that's taught in gyms today is really a functional strength workout. So you've got people going to yoga for different reasons. You have big numbers of men going to yoga, which also fascinates me. You know, we've been trying to get men into group fitness classes for a long time. The one that's succeeding the most is yoga. It's still only about 30, just over 30% men attending yoga classes. But interestingly, men attend a lot more often than women do, the men who are attending. So it's sort of about, yeah, it's fascinating what's going on there. So feeling good, you know, emotional health is one that is growing, that probably does have some reward in it for club operators to offer more and more of those sorts of activities, breathing classes, mindfulness classes, meditation classes, and of course all of the yoga, Tai Chi, yoga fusion, Pilates sort of things.
You guys have been around over 50 years, which I guess I know there are businesses that have been around that long time, but in our industry, that's certainly a long time. And I know from what I've read, you're also one of the first people to have, you know, I believe you had your first boutique studio in Bondi when the group exercise started. Is that correct?
Our first boutique was actually in Auckland City in 1980, and it was in an old gym. It was in our original 1968 gym that my parents had opened, and we moved sort of up and over the hill and opened a much bigger gym then. And we turned the old one into a boutique, just aerobics, and that was really the introduction of aerobics in New Zealand. We had people lining up the street to get in, and that was huge for us. We moved to, we expanded throughout New Zealand. We opened more gyms and more group exercise only studios over the next few years. And a lot of those were boutiques, really. You know, we had actors and singers and top sports people, and we were paying them $1 a head. We were charging $3 a head and paying them $1 a head, which was a lot of money in those days. You know, nobody pays that much now. Some of these studios we could get 100 plus people, and so you'd have a starving actor who might have been performing on the stage that evening, and they would come in and teach a class at 5:15 at night and earn $100 for it. That was huge money back then, and $3 was a lot of money to charge. We moved to Australia in '81, and yes, we did open a boutique in Bondi Junction then, and we did a similar thing. We had sort of Australian, you know, top dancers and people from acting schools and sports people, and again it was really a pretty terrible little gym, that one. We had a really nice premises lined up, and at the last minute we couldn't get council permit to do it, and we very quickly took a space in a hotel that had been previously had been an illegal gambling casino that had been closed down, and the landlords were desperate to have somebody in, and so we moved straight into it. Really, it was a pretty rotten space, but despite that, you know, because of these great teachers and these great classes, we got rated the best gym in Sydney, in the Daily Telegraph, which which was most unfair. A lot of the beautiful facilities that there were, because, Aussie was pretty early in the fitness industry, and there were some pretty nice gyms in Australia in the early 80s, but our terrible little gym in Bondi Junction, little boutique, got rated the best one by the daily newspaper, which was, interesting to have happened back then. And that business model has come round again. The whole boutique model has, I think what happened in the 80s was that traditional clubs saw that this was important, and they started putting in big group exercise studios and really bringing in top teachers and including that within the membership, and that pretty well killed the boutiques. It'll be interesting to see whether that happens now. Anecdotally, I hear that that a lot of the boutiques are struggling a bit now. There's been so much competition in the boutique industry, and I hear that the boutiques that have maybe 2 studios or 3 studios or 2 studios and a weight training gym as well are the ones who are doing well. And so that's starting to look like a traditional gym. At the same time, we're seeing traditional clubs adding boutique spaces in, and there's some kind of a convergence going on there in the industry. So, yeah, that's, I think, probably a good thing for the industry. I think it is going to see us providing more fun, more motivating, more results-oriented places for people, and will be a healthy thing. I think that some people may get left behind. We interestingly, in Australia, in the mid 80s, we had a big budget club boom, and this really happened in the US also in the early 80s. We had a huge boom of low-cost clubs, and we had a big bust. We had about 300 or 400 clubs in Australia back then, which was a lot because we only had 15 million population in Australia then, which went out of business. Lots and lots of budget chains, and the prices got lower and lower and lower. And sort of when it came time, I think, to renovate the clubs, the money just wasn't there, and the bigger clubs got better at what they were doing, increased the value, and people they found a way to compete, and people moved over. A lot of the old budget clubs got bought up and turned into sort of group exercise got added in, and that's what we're seeing now. I think with the competition between budget clubs, low cost clubs, high value, low cost, whatever we want to call them. There's so much competition there that we are seeing them add value. We are seeing them, start to add either extra activities, like Group X, or we are starting to see them have tiered pricing. You've got chains like Choose in Southern California, where you are, where you've got 3 levels of pricing. You've got the basic weights and cardio only price. You've got the next, which I think is maybe $10 or thereabouts. You've got the sort of the group exercise inclusive class rate at about $22, and then about $40 you've got one that includes the boutique. So they have a boutique in them, like a functional training Group X class that sort of looks like, I don't know, Orange Theory or F45 or something like that. And that's a higher membership tier at $40 plus dollars, and I hear they're doing very well. So I think that's that model is maybe a good model that we're going to see more and more clubs introduce. Sort of a fascinating time in the industry now. All sorts of different models, and the industry's sorting itself out. I know with our clubs in New Zealand, we've got 12 of our own clubs here. And we are adding boutique clubs in because we've got so many boutiques competing with us here. We have, 70 or 80 F45 clubs, for instance, in a market of 5 million people. It's like having 70 or 80 F45 clubs in, I'll think of San Diego. We probably have a slightly bigger population than Greater San Diego, but certainly half the size of Greater San Francisco. And so, yeah, we've been putting in our own boutiques, and that's been incredibly popular. That has really brought a wave of young people back into the clubs, huge numbers. It's kind of made, some of our clubs were probably aging a bit, and it's made them hot again. You know, we've got some very cool, trendy cycle classes like the Trip, where you're riding, you got the big screen, you're riding through futuristic cities, or through cities on other planets, or whatever it is. And our biggest one in our flagship club in Auckland City has 100 bikes, and it's just booked out all the time. You know, we went from having 800 odd rides a week to 2,500 rides a week in that studio. It's just remarkable, and people have gone nuts to it. For it, interestingly, not just young people, a lot of young people have come in, but the older people really are enjoying that one. But then we've got a group functional training studio called Ceremony, and that's incredibly popular. And then we've got a boxing and treadmill class called Conqueror, which is incredibly popular. So we went from having a 10,000 square foot, it had originally been a parking garage, and we turned it into a CrossFit studio. We'd had the biggest CrossFit studio in New Zealand, and we'd run the national CrossFit championships there for a number of years. And martial arts, we'd had, you know, boxing and jiu-jitsu studios in there. We were getting about 500 visits a week through when it was those things, and it went to 5,000 when we switched it to 3 boutiques. So yeah, it's pretty good evidence. You know, we're now going through our clubs around New Zealand and introducing all of those boutiques into them one by one. It's sort of proven itself.
So I've been told you're quite a visionary, with a real long-term thinker. You must have started to see the boutique re-emerging from probably what it was when you were involved in the 80s. How did you plan for that as it relates to your Les Mills model? Because I guess from what we see is the boutiques are very much, well, it's unique programming, it's a unique concept, we want our own thing. And I guess that did put a lot of pressure on I suppose a lot of the traditional clubs that had a group X room and a cardio room, etc. What did you did you sort of anticipate that happening, and how, if it did that affect your Les Mills products? Because I guess you weren't able to offer that to all of those types of facilities.
Look, first of all, in terms of the visionary thing, I think that's not true. The thing, I'm really just very old. I'm very old, and I've been around and seen the cycle a few times already. So I just remember what's happened in the past. And also, I think for us that we got lucky. We found a model for our own clubs because we had these boutiques in the early 80s, and we had tremendous popularity around group exercise. We built our clubs with big studios. So we built our clubs to hold 100 people plus in a class. You know, our biggest clubs will hold up to 300 people in our main studios, and that was a very successful model for us. If you think of the industry in terms of motivation, got a lot of motivational factors there. You've got the energy of people working out together, which they love. You know, they don't have to be friends. We're pack animals. You know, we're social animals. The energy of being in a room with a bunch of people is something that people enjoy. Teachers, you know, instructors, having sort of rock star instructors is a big motivator for people. Music, again, a big motivator for people. And if you can make a sort of a cool studio environment, then that's a motivator. So we built big studios and in our clubs, and that meant that we were able to pay the best teachers. We were able to put energy and wages into managing our group exercise. So we had this model through our New Zealand and later Australian clubs, because we had several Australian clubs. We did actually buy the biggest club in downtown Sydney in about 1984, and we bought a few other clubs in Australia, and we had clubs throughout the 80s in Australia. But the whole Australian model really was built around having big studios, and you had a lot of successful clubs in Australia, really still do, that have big successful studios. The Fitness First clubs in Australia they were built around that model. Some of those clubs were around, and the operators were around from the early 80s, and they built studios that would hold 150 people. So there was a model in this part of the world that was sort of successful. We've been trying to push the message to other clubs around the world. You should build bigger group exercise studios, because this really is a great activity in terms of retaining people and helping people and giving a perception of value, giving motivation, perception of value. Some countries have moved towards adopting that model. Still, I think the average group exercise studio around the world is only about 1,500 square feet, about 150 square meters. I think you miss the economies of scale there that you get once you get to have more than 2,000 square feet. So that's kind of a message that I would push. I would say to people, in terms of running a profitable business, you've got low cost, you've got high cost, you've got boutiques. I think that there is another model, which is just a traditional club, which has a big studio that can fit a lot of people in, and you can charge normal membership rates that the masses of people can afford, and you can still be profitable.
Yeah. Has that rise of that model affected your programming business at all? Have you seen your customers that you used to work with try to compete to say, well, look, we better do our own programming instead of sort of buying it in? We're the experts. Has that had any sort of impact negatively to you guys?
We've always seen that. We licensed our programs starting in 1980 in New Zealand. We licensed them to other clubs, and in Australia we licensed them to other clubs all through the 80s. And for instance, with Body Pump, people said, well, my teachers can do their own barbell class. We've always had that, and over time I think people get sick of trying to create their own programming. There's a lot of work that goes into really, really doing it at a level of quality. The whole standardization process is, it's difficult. It sort of, it costs us a lot of money to do this well, to have good choreographers who are creating classes in each of the different modalities. We've got 22 different classes now. To have choreographers who are creating those classes every 3 months and testing them and trialing them. We'll test and trial those clubs 40, 50 times, and then we will film them using top presenters from around the world, because they role model great teaching technique, and then we've got to train the teachers around the world to deliver them. Do all of that stuff well in a way where you can guarantee that you will deliver your classes at a consistent high standard is not easy. And most of the clubs that have done it, most chains have done it around the world over the years, and most of them eventually, pretty much all of the ones who sort of started doing it in the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s have just given up on it and said, well, actually, it's cheaper for us to license it from another provider, be it Les Mills or somebody else. And that's my version. I'm sticking to it.
So because I've been around in the space for a long time, and I've seen all of the people that have tried to come and compete with you, and I've seen all of the operators that have tried to do it themselves. And to be honest, in with what you do, you guys don't really have any competition, and because if it's not something that's easy to. Well, it's extremely difficult to imitate. And in fact, I guess if you ever try to do it, and we've been involved in a number of brands, even people like Reebok and that over the years that have tried to do it, it's like, look, when you start looking at what's involved, it's like only a crazy person would even try and create this business. So what about you guys is, you are an anomaly. What would you say if you had to boil it down to sort of like, some key ingredients? What would you say has made you guys create this sort of anomaly within the sort of fitness space? I'm putting your fitness clubs aside, because that's a different conversation, and you've done some great stuff there as well. But as it relates to the Les Mills program, what would you boil that down to?
Yeah, look, originally we did do it for our own clubs. It was a way to get consistent quality at our own clubs in New Zealand and in Australia. And then, as it started to cost us more to do it, we licensed it to other clubs to help pay for it. And Yeah, there are some weird bits of it, like the music licensing, for instance. We started licensing music in 1980, 1981, and we have relationships with hundreds of music companies around the world. We license music, we make cover versions, we license. If we can't get the rights to the original or can't afford them, we will get the rights to the songwriters' rights, the publishing rights, and we will make cover versions. We're the biggest employers of New Zealand musicians. We make cover versions of over 1,000 songs a year, and an individual cover version of a song may have anywhere from 30 to 100 different instrumental and vocal parts. So just like over 40 years, like Topsy, it's grown, and that's, I guess, enabled us to kind of stay in the business. It hasn't been an incredibly profitable business for us, I'd have to say. We make as much profit from our 12 clubs as we do from this business. But it's a fun business. It's something that we've loved, is working with clubs around the world and working with instructors. Hats off to group fitness instructors around the world. They are not very well paid in general, and they're incredibly passionate people who do a lot of good in the world. Really improve a lot of people's lives and drive the success of a lot of clubs. I think could drive a lot more success for clubs. And they're wonderful, passionate, purpose-driven people. So, we've got 130, 140,000 of them who we work with, and that's just a lovely part of our business and part of our lives, which we really enjoyed doing. So, it's you can say you're not in it for the money, and I don't. I think people are in things we all act on mixed motives all of the time. Lovely quote from Rowan Williams, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and we do. We all want to be profitable. We all want to succeed against competition. But I think in our best moments and probably our most satisfying moments, we are doing things that we love, and those are the times when it all comes together. You get in touch with your purpose, and you love your job and what you're doing. And so I think that's got to play a part. If you're going to be in business for a long time, that's got to play a part in it. You do have to be in touch with your purpose and your passion. You have to be doing what you love and loving what you do. So that's, I guess, part of it for us.
It's pretty unique. You guys have certainly stayed true. It seems that you've stayed true to a message and a vision for a very long time. And I think also what's quite unique is that you're a family business, and you've been able to sort of carry that over for a number of generations already, which is again very difficult in itself. When did that sort of vision, and how did that vision for what you guys do as a family sort of start, and what do you know exactly what that moment was when it kind of it kicked this whole thing off?
Yeah, look, I think what you're probably talking about is our culture, and that started way back, really, before I was born. When I was born, we lived on the side of New Zealand's #1 athletic track, and half of our house was the Auckland Weightlifting Federation gym. And so from when I was born in 1955, or my earliest memories, were athletes and sort of big, strong weightlifters walking through our house. My dad became the national track and field coach. He was a shot putter and a discus thrower originally, competed in 4 Olympic Games and won Commonwealth Games gold medals, and became the national track and field coach. So there was that passion that sports people have for fitness and for just working out the perfect way to get that little bit of extra distance or that little bit faster time. You get that obsession with it in sports. When we opened our first public gym, my parents opened it when I was 13 in 1968. We employed sports people, weightlifters, track athletes, martial artists, gymnasts. And so you had people who were passionate about it. And I think that probably was where the culture came from. That's just the passion for sports and fitness has continued right throughout the generations. I was influenced by, when I was young, when I started working in the gym, cleaning the toilets and the showers when I was 13 after school. There were these sports coach people, these passionate people, and I think I was always inspired by them, and those people inspired me and my generation, and we passed that on, and it's been passed on and passed on through the generations. I think that's probably the fairest answer.
Has it been difficult from a family perspective to I guess to stay relatively aligned in terms of the family life and the business life, in terms of where you want to go and the opportunities and what you shouldn't do, and I guess managing different personalities as well? Has that been tough, or have you guys just been lucky that that's gone as a breeze?
We've had fierce debates over the years, and that's an important thing. It's in any business you want to have rigorous debate, and it's nice that can happen in families, because it can, the debates can get pretty aggressive, but then you can forgive each other. And get on with it and figure out the best way to do things. I've always really tried to listen to my kids, because I sort of knew that I had to fight pretty hard with my mum and dad to make the changes that I wanted to make in the business. And so I did try hard to listen to my kids, and we still had rigorous debates, but I think that's been a good thing for us. I think that they have really brought in a lot of the innovation into our company. Our grit classes, our HIT classes, our trip class, the one that I was talking about with the cycle class with the CGX, and our current sort of boutique classes. Those guys have driven that. They've also driven a lot of our thinking around how we market to millennial and Gen Z audiences, around how we decorate the gyms, around how we employ and work with people of those generations. So it is important. I think if you want to stay relevant, especially stay relevant to the younger generations, which are primarily who we deal with. The fitness industry has been that way for a long time. You can look at the average age of the clubs, and you can look at our graphs, and we've got people in our clubs who are in their 80s. But when you look at the big numbers of people who are joining clubs, they are under 35. And for most clubs in the world, most chains around the world, surprisingly, they are under 30 years old. Tends to average about 24, 25 years old, the average joining age. So it is important that we can be relevant to those people. And I think that's a message that I would have for other club owners, is listen to your young people. Listen to your children if they're in the industry, and employ young staff, and listen to what they have to say if you want to remain relevant, if you want to be successful at getting those young members who will be the members who stay with you on and off throughout their lives.
How have you been able to deal with, I guess, stepping aside and allowing your children to sort of, I guess, take more of a leading role? Because I read that you mentioned that you want to be active in the business into your 90s, and that there's certain programs that you're very passionate about, and you've got a strong opinion. I work with my family, my brother, sister, mother, father, and I kind of get a little bit of that. How do you sort of take that sort of emotion of what you fact you've been instrumental in the business, and you've got your own views with your children's views that you may not necessarily always line up with?
Yeah, again, I just, I realized that we were aging. We started to see it in our membership demographics. We started to see our average member age increasing. And when our son came back from university in the US, he said, our clubs just aren't cool for me and my mates. And you got to do something about this. And so, I got it. It's right. If we want to stay around for another generation, then we have to listen. And so I started listening hard. And then it's a balancing act. You've got you do have to counsel them. You've got to and help them to manage it. They've got great ideas. They don't have a lot of experience in business. They actually have great instincts often for marketing and for managing people. But you're helping them, you're educating them, and that's an important thing, I think, for all of us, older generation in the industry, to help these younger guys develop, because they are our future. That's probably what it comes down to, I guess. Yeah.
That's all right. Not easy, I guess. It's but I have to take a hat off to you. What? How many generations are you? Three now, is that right?
Yeah, we're three, and we've our grandkids are sort of now moving into the. We've got a 11-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 6 and a 4-year-old grandchildren, and who all live with us, which I'd sort of probably would have been horrified at the thought of, but I love that. I love that now. Our daughter and her husband sold their house and moved in with us 18 months ago, and we just love having them here and love having the grandchildren here. It works way better than I ever would have thought it would. But, the grandchildren are really starting to, especially the 11 and 10-year-old, are really starting to get interested in sports and fitness. So who knows? It may go for another generation. I think the other thing is, when you see, you've got to be prepared to take some risk with your children, with what they do, and help them along, help to try and remove some of the risk in it, but empower them to do what they want. And then when you see it succeed, it's an incredible feeling to see the next generation succeeding, and it gives you confidence to sort of support them more and more, gives them confidence. So a little bit more on the subject, really. It is an important subject for us, because a lot of the industry now does tend to be from my generation, does tend to be older white males, and we've got to be prepared to listen.
What's your views on failure? If I'm correct, I understood that your body pump program came out of a time of what you could call, whether you call it failure or a difficult time. And I suppose most business leaders at the moment in the world are probably going through a similar period themselves, where they're sort of maybe on their backsides and having to sort of think about what to do next. What have you learned? You've been through some tough times. What have you learned, and what message would you share to people that are probably not having it easy at the moment?
Look, yes, I have been through tough times, and when people ask me how I've been successful, I say, well, I simply made all of the mistakes and ran out of different mistakes to make. And if you hang around for long enough, you're gonna find a way. A blind pig will find an acorn every once in a while. So yes, I've made lots of mistakes. Body pump was an interesting one. It did evolve over a long period of time. We had in New Zealand and Australia in the early 80s, we had the old super circuit classes, and that became in the late 80s one of the most popular classes in our clubs, and probably in clubs all around Australia and New Zealand. That's with half weights and half aerobics. So you'd be lifting for 30-35 seconds on a pin-loaded machine or a hydraulic machine. You'd be running high knees in the middle, or on a mini tramp, or something like that. And that was a big class in the 80s, and then it got a bit complicated. It's hard to figure why super circuits sort of petered out, because they've come back again. Really, that's sort of what F45 is, and that's what they descended from. But I think a lot of what was getting taught in the 35 seconds in the middle started to become more and more complex aerobics and more dance oriented, and put people off. And we'd had dumbbell classes, which were slow and controlled right again from probably the early 80s. And it got to the point where we had hundreds and hundreds of dumbbells because people needed different weights. And one day I just looked at a short bar that we had in the women's gym, and I said, hello, we can solve our dumbbell problem by making it interchangeable. And we created body pump. And the first time that we trialed it was a failure. And it was sort of back to the drawing board, and then it worked. sort of. But that's a different story. But in terms of difficult times, yes, we've been through difficult times. We've been through. This is at least my fourth economic crisis, global economic crisis, and the '87 crash in New Zealand was particularly bad. The stock market crashed, and we were a public company then. The share market crashed in '87. Followed by the property market in '88, and we didn't come out till about '93. The people who had taken over our public company, we were taken over just a month or so before the share market crashed. So kind of lucky in a way for my parents. They got out, went into politics, and my dad became the mayor of Auckland, did 3 terms as the mayor of Auckland. They had a completely different life. He was a pretty big personality in New Zealand, having been a sports person and that. He had a life as a politician. But I then really, loved the gym industry. I had come into it through group fitness. So I wanted to stay in, and the liquidators really of the companies who had taken us over sold it to me and loaned me the money to do it. And it sort of took me a long time. That was a huge debt burden. It took me probably 5 or 6 years to get out from under that. And often that was wondering how I'd pay the wages next week. It sort of felt like, a bit like I know what it's feeling like for a lot of people around the world. And you just put one foot in front of the other. You figure out a way to get through, and step by step, bit by bit, these times will pass. And if you love what you do, if you're passionate about it, you may wind up having to take partners on, sell part of your business. You'll have to take some big loans. Maybe you can get loans from the government. Maybe you can persuade your members to buy memberships for their family and their friends. You get good at guerrilla marketing. You get good at finding ways of improving what you do, that's an important thing, that you don't freeze in the time of a recession and let the business stagnate. You really need to focus on how you can add value, how you can make the club or the studio a better place for people, something that's going to attract more people. And they will come back, and it'll be a struggle. Hopefully not 5 years, hopefully just sort of 1 or 2, but hang in there, things will get better. We're in a growth industry, we're in a long-term growth industry. When I came into it in the 60s, it was about 1% of the population. And now, as I said earlier, our research shows that there are 30% plus of the population in industrialized countries who are using some kind of a gym. And we're in a big growth industry for all sorts of reasons, all sorts of big sociological trends involved in this. It will continue to grow. Time poorness, the health crisis, woman wanting to be fit and strong and empowered, all of those things, the fragmentation of society and the fact that we are social, the fact that people do want to, you can see from social media, people desperately want to commune, and the gyms have been one of the beneficiaries of the dissolution of a lot of our traditional ways of communing. So big trends that are driving what we do. If you can hang in there, then things will come right, and I think we're in a good industry. But you've got to be good. There's always going to be competition. You've got to be good.
I've noticed that in the time that I've been in the industry, a lot less than you, but in the 20 plus years, that I've seen you guys go through changes. And as a business owner, I've kind of watched and thought, okay, I wonder how they're going to play this card. I wonder what they're going to do next. And just out of curiosity, really, it's like, what would I do in that situation? And a good example is your music business. You started with cassette tapes and CDs and DVDs, and now it's digital, and you seem to kind of effortlessly go from one thing to another, which in some cases could totally change people's businesses. So it seems that you're able to adapt and be resilient to whatever has happened, and always seemingly be a step ahead, whether it's what you've done from a digital perspective. There's a number of great innovations. What do you do as a company and as a team to sort of do two things? One, to sort of keep an eye on the fact of, well, look, cassettes are going to disappear soon, or DVDs are going to go out soon. How do you keep an eye on the future? And then how do you, as a group of people, and as you said, 140,000 instructors around the world, that you've also got to kind of get on board with these changes? How do you manage that? Because it sounds like it's quite a difficult thing to pull off, but you seem to do it okay.
Look, I think that a lot of the tech changes, that's not rocket science. Well, the tech may be rocket science, remarkable really, but changing that's not rocket science. You just have to follow the trends. That stuff is pretty obvious. Getting people to come along and make those switches, that's, as you switch from one technology to another, that's always a little bit rough, and you've got to sort of walk a tightrope there. Probably the best example right now in our industry is what's going on with online fitness. And a lot of people are feeling tremendously intimidated by online fitness, by at-home fitness. When you look at this in context in the long term, this has been around for a long, long time. Goes right back to really probably Jack LaLanne on TV in the US in the 50s and the 60s. When I was a kid, we lived in the US in the early 60s, and Jack LaLanne his TV show was always one of my heroes, and that probably was one of the things that got people into fitness. And then later you had Richard Simmons, and you had Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda's videos sold more than the biggest blockbuster movie sold. And she brought millions and millions of people into gyms and probably helped to power a lot of the aerobics industry. We had Tybo in the 90s, all of these things, they've been around for a long time with videos and then with DVDs and with TV shows. So I think that it's powered the industry, it's added to the industry way more than it's cannibalized the industry. I just think that's pretty clear. And from our own research with Les Mills On Demand, we know that very big percentage of the people who sign up for Les Mills On Demand use that as a stepping stone to go to the gym. They get involved with doing group exercise and using little bits of equipment and that, and then they have the confidence to go to the gym. In terms of Les Mills On Demand for us, it's something that we had been trying to do since the late 90s. We actually, in 98, I think it was, we released our first body pump video, which sold in Walmart, and we had a problem. The cardboard boxes that we put it in, we had a bar that screwed together, and the cardboard boxes that we put the whole weight kit in weren't strong enough, and the weights tended to smash the videotapes when they were in transit, and it didn't do very well in Walmart. People were complaining about these smashed videotapes, but we tried to do that for a very long time, and we partnered with Beachbody in about 10 plus years ago, and had Les Mills Pump and Les Mills Combat in partnership with Beachbody. And then when the industry, and they were reasonably successful, when the industry switched to online, we started to do that ourselves. So we'd been working on Les Mills On Demand for quite a while, and it's a sort of a bottomless pit. Working on that tech, we've invested tens of millions of dollars in that, and we were still budgeted to lose $10 million this year on Les Mills On Demand. It will make a small profit. Certainly it has benefited from the increased demand for home fitness when gyms were shut. It will make an increased profit, but one of the reasons that we did this was we wanted to do what had sort of happened with Jane Fonda and with Tybo and those things over the years. We wanted to be able to spend more and more money promoting our classes to bring people into our core business, which was the classes in the gyms. And so it has enabled us to really increase our marketing spend, and that's sort of the big aim from Les Mills On Demand. It is not easy. to make money, to really make money. You look, Peloton is still losing a huge amount of money. They lost, I think, 150, 200 million US dollars last year, and I will be very surprised if they're profitable this year. It is not an easy business, but so I think, don't be threatened by it. I think that it does help the industry, and help grow the industry, and forgot what I was going to say next. I had something else to say about that, but forgot.
Well, I was talking to Martin Seibold from Life Fit Group, Fitness First in Germany, and he was telling me how they put millions, they developed their app, they tried to create content, and I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and he said, look, you cannot make money out of this. And so he said that how he's partnered with Les Mills now, and they're using your premium content within their app. I do have a lot of conversations with people, and I've been on podcasts myself where you see operators saying, well, look, we're running fitness clubs, we need to develop app, we need to be in the content business. You guys have been doing that for a long time. What's your, without, I suppose, if you're not necessarily having your Les Mills hat on, but what would you say to people that are saying, well, look, we've got to pivot, we've got to do something to bring money in? Is this a strategy that we should look at? What advice would you give to those people?
I think that it is something, as I said, that benefits the industry, and I think that a lot of the competition out there will drive people into clubs. I'm not quite so sure about that with something like Peloton, where they're selling a whole sort of an ecosystem, but probably that's wrong. Probably Peloton will drive more people into cycle classes in traditional clubs. It's hard to do. You want to do it well. You've got to make sure that you do it really, really well. If you put shitty classes online, that's not going to motivate people to come to your gym. If you're going to do it, you've got to do it really well. Have very high quality teachers teaching really high quality classes. And for us, we've said we will offer clubs a commission if they want to have their members. Throughout the lockdown, we said to people, to clubs, we'll give it to you free, so that you can give something to your members at homes. So people who are licensing our live classes, we gave them free lessons on demand throughout lockdowns, and still are around the world, so that they could engage their people or maybe charge them something. And we said, if your people want to stay members, then we'll pay you a commission. So, there are people, we and other people who are making high quality stuff who will do that, and you can earn a commission out of it. I guess, think about where your core strengths are. Are your core strengths in developing video yourself, or are you better to focus on making an incredible club and work with somebody else to supply that stuff to your members, build some kind of a partnership? So I'm trying not to turn that into an advertisement, just sort of give the big picture there, but that's the reality of it.
And I've read some information. You guys did a survey, I think it's about a couple of years old now, but maybe a year old, where it talks about the people that are working out at home in terms of them using a gym. Like I know people are certainly over this period, they're concerned that as people develop that habit and they invest in their home gyms or their Pelotons, that they're not going to come back. But I think, am I correct in saying that the research you did a few years ago sort of says that people that work out from home are actually, a high percentage of them are actually work out at gym as well. So they don't do one or the other. Is that correct?
Yeah, the research actually said that most people who go to gyms also work out at home, which is common sense, really, and it was about 82% of people, and it was a pretty big study, big number of gyms of people. It was done by Nielsen, one of the big research agencies, and they surveyed thousands and thousands of people, and 82% of the people who are gym members were working out at home as well, and there were about 63% of those of that group who were doing some kind of a home exercise video already. So that's probably 4 or 5 years old, that research. I'm told that it's gone up, that it's an even higher number of people who are exercising at home now anyway. So it is going to happen. I think it is to your advantage if you can control your ecosystem a little bit. I don't, I am a little bit worried about the Pelotons and the Silicon Valleys of the world coming into this game and trying to control our members' ecosystems. I think it's better if you can do that. Yeah, my thoughts.
Do you think that the likes of Apple and I'm sure there's going to be more like Amazon and others? Do you think they're going to be a big threat to the industry and businesses like yours?
I don't know. Of course, you've got to, of course we are worried about the effect of the competition. I think in terms of the club industry, they're more likely to drive more people in, but it depends. We'll see how well they do it. Some of the shoe companies, as you said earlier, some of the shoe companies have tried to launch their own gym programs and group exercise programs over the years, and the focus has not tended to be on actually attracting people to classes and making better classes or making the clubs more successful. It's been on selling shoes. So, if your motivation is on selling a device or selling a shoe or something like that, it could be that you're not going to do as good a job as you would. But having said that, never underestimate Apple, and Jay Blahnik, who is running their fitness division, is tremendously competent people who's got some good people making content for them. So we'll see. I guess it's going to be, I'm sure that the competition will be something that will be good for the fitness industry in general.
One of the things that I think you guys have done, which is quite unique really, that the communities that you've been able to create, and I've been to a few of your events. We used to sell your products years ago actually, and I've seen the energy and the electricity that of these people, both instructors and people that do the body pump and your various classes. What at the moment we're going through an interesting time where the instructors, some of them are out of work, some of them don't have that base where they're going to. How are you as a business sort of maintaining that sort of relationship and that culture with your instructors, and what advice can you give for operators that are also trying to do the same thing where they've almost kind of lost a lot of their key people from their businesses?
Yeah, look, it's hard. It is really tough times. I know it's tough times for a lot of operators. It's been tough times for us as well. I know that a lot of clubs just can't afford to keep paying their instructors. A lot of clubs are paying some of them to do live streaming. I think that's a good thing. Again, do it well. Do your live streaming well. You need to present your brand well. You don't want to have a great gym and a shitty live stream. Pay them to do live streaming, or let them do their own live streaming. Whatever they can do to keep earning a crust, help them to get whatever government subsidies are going. When you open again, it's going to be very important. Those people are going to be very important to you. So we've got to support them as much as we can. We're communicating with instructors as much as we possibly can. And we're just doing whatever we can to keep them motivated, engaged, running online events for them, offering cheap or free training for them, and trying to just find different ways to make their lives better. It is a very tough time for the industry. I can't understate that. Yeah,
definitely challenging. And I know, certainly talking to a lot of operators, that's, it's a people business, and a lot of their talent are finding other things to do now and setting up on their own. And it's a very, very, very difficult time. So a couple of questions, and just couple of quick ones before we wrap up. So if you could replay a moment in the Les Mills history, what would that be and why?
Replay a moment in the Les Mills history,
or a period of your of the organization.
Oh, there's been big periods for us. So I came back from university in the US in 79. I finished at UCLA in 78, and I'd seen group exercise starting there. My first job, I spent a month. My brother-in-law was the lead singer in New Zealand's top rock band, and they came to LA while I was there, and I wound up managing a rock band for a year, which was an interesting experience, not a very healthy experience, but taught me a lot about promoting and about sort of attracting crowds, and some of the lessons that I took from there into group exercise. I launched group exercise in New Zealand in 1980. And I did bring a lot of entertainers into the industry then. So it was a fabulously exciting time. That model that we talked about earlier, it looked a bit like the boutique models now, but we had just people lining up the streets, and we grew really quickly throughout New Zealand and Australia. So that was a fabulous time for us. In 1990, we created Body Pump. And that was a thing that really took us international in about 1995. And that was our first big international program. And going international was just a fantastic buzz to be dealing with gyms all around the world and instructors all around the world. And then more recently, some of the stuff that my kids have done, my son and daughter have done. So when Les and his mates launched the trip, that was just, for me, I thought this revolutionizes the industry, and it hasn't gone very fast. I think we made a mistake. We launched it about 5 years ago, and we really said, to do this, you've got to build a new bike studio with a huge big screen, at least a 10-meter screen, and that's expensive for people to do. We've only got around the world, there are only about 130 of those big screen studios. Beginning of last year, we sort of said, okay, well, this isn't going fast enough, and we will launch a smaller format version for smaller screens, 9-screen mosaics or something like that, and that's gone a lot faster. I think there are 500 or more of those around the world. I do think that is going to be one of the big things of the future, and it's a class that I'm personally addicted to, so I'm sort of exhilarated by seeing some of the new stuff that our new generation has developed, and some of the new stuff that the industry in general has developed in the boutiques. There's some incredible workouts, and that's creating a whole new wave of motivation. So yeah, waves of exciting times that I can remember.
So you managed a rock band, and there must have been some interesting stories with that maybe you've not shared in the traditional industry magazine. So come on, what's an interesting story that not too many people know from that period of your life?
Oh man, okay, I don't know if I can share most of that stuff, but I was driving my brother-in-law, who was the lead singer of the band. He just played at the Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset. He played alongside the Knack, a band called the Knack, who did My Sharona and Martha and the Motels, and his band was pretty successful. But he was drunk as a skunk, and I was driving him home. He and his sister lived with me in Westwood at UCLA in my apartment at the time, and he'd never learned to drive, and I'd tried to teach him to drive at one stage before. And it had been a horrifying experience, but he said, "Come on, let me drive the car. I'm feeling confident. I'm feeling good. Let me drive the car." So I said, "All right, okay, Graham, I'll let you drive the car." And he drove. I let him drive around the block, and he was, micro meters away from the cars on the side of the road, and I'm panicking the whole way around. I said, "Okay, that's great. Well done. We're going to park the car." And I said, "You've got to go into the garage, and I've got my car. You're going to park behind my car, which is in the garage, and there's a car parked on the street. You've got to swing wide to miss that and park behind my car." So he swung very wide, and I said, "Make sure you hit the brakes. And you don't panic and drive into my car." So he swung and I took his foot on and off the brake accelerator. So, all right, he swings very wide, and then, of course, goes to hit the brakes, hits the accelerator by mistake, panics, and the car accelerates. It's got tires that big. It's a 1968 Pontiac GTO, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds. And it was the band's car. And he swung so wide that he went into the neighbour's garage and he kept his foot flat to the floor with this big hot rod, and he concertinaed their car to about 2/3 of its size into the garage wall, the concrete wall in front. And he smashed through the garage door was shut. He smashed through it, and there was a huge crash and just matchwood, broken timber from the door, and the whole neighbourhood sort of went quiet. People's heads, looking through their windows. And a minute later, my sister appears outside, starts bashing her husband over the head with a slipper and saying, "I knew it was you, I knew it was you." And there was just devastation all around. This is a catastrophe. And he and I looked at each other and we just started laughing. We just couldn't stop laughing and giggling. And a horrific thing. We had to pay the landlord to fix the garage and pay the neighbours for fixing their car and that. But that's sort of some of the things that happen in the rock and roll industry.
Sounds like it was a good period. So last question then, Phillip. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make it possible. Outside of what we've spoke about today, what would be a memorable example of where you've escaped your own personal limits?
Oh, look, you have visions, you set big goals, and often ones that you don't ever expect to realize. And that happened to me in sports, that the time when you really make a big breakthrough in your running times or something, you've sort of planned for it, but it's unexpected and it's wonderful when it happens. That kind of happened with when we were international. We said we're going to be supplying 10,000 gyms by 2004 around the world, and we never really expected. It was a big, hairy, audacious goal that we set to set our sights high and make ourselves do better things. And we didn't quite achieve it. We didn't achieve it in 2004, but by the end of 2005, we were supplying 10,000 gyms around the world, and that was, wow, we never really actually thought that would happen, and that was a pretty cool thing. So, yeah, I do believe in setting big visions. I think you've got to back them with a plan, and I think you've really got to believe in them. I think you've got to be connected with your purpose, and it's got to be around something that you love doing. Put a great group of people around you. There's so much in that. Get a great group of people, have a great vision, and make a strategy and a plan. And it is possible to break through and do what you never might have believed was possible.
Fantastic. Well, Phillip, thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for what you and your team do, the innovation and commitment to moving the industry forward. I've always sort of followed it and been inspired what you guys have done, and look forward to continuing to watch your success in the future. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. My pleasure. Keep up the wonderful job that you're doing, and same to anybody who's watching this. Hang in there. Keep up the great work. You're doing a great thing for the world. It's an important industry. Good luck.
Thank you.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.